Hello everybody, and today I'm going to be showing you the themes and plans for black in the Queen's Indian Defence. And like the King's Indian Defence, this is the sister of that opening, it involves black fianchettoing the light squared bishop. So the normal move order reached is d4, knight f6, c4. So this is the most popular position if white plays d4 move 1. e6. So this keeps the options open for black. Possibly d5 could be played. c5 could be played, going into a Benoni next move. Bishop b4 check or bishop b4 is sometimes played, and also the Queen's Indian. So if knight f3 is the usual move order to get into the Queen's Indian, and here if black plays d5, which he does sometimes do later, the e6 pawn is also preventing the light squared bishop on c8 from moving out to f5 or g4 from using the diagonal. So black tries to solve the problem of what to do with the bishop early by playing b6. And that way the bishop can move on to usually b7, but sometimes a6, and exert influence on the diagonals. So there's a few options white has. g3 is quite popular, and black can either play bishop b7, which is the old main line, challenging white's bishop, which will come to g2, so there'll be a battle over the light squares. And the other move is to go after the c4 pawn with the bishop on a6. And again, the plan for black is actually to fight on the light squares, at least for a little while. So white needs to defend that pawn. So there's a few options. I think moving the queen is a little bit, and it just looks a bit suspicious. White doesn't usually want to move the queen this early when they haven't established what is going to, which minor pieces are going to be where. So the most popular move is a b3, because knight bd2 would hem in the c1 bishop, and e3 would weaken lots and lots of light squares for the white, light squares for white. So the bishop on f1 would also be committed to defending c4 and unable to fianchetto to g2. So b3 is most popular, and what b3 does is it's trying to set up the moves bishop b2 and knight c3, so a double fianchetto. And black can sneakily avoid that by playing first d5 to threaten the pawn again. Bishop g2 is quite common, and it's very, very dangerous for black to take on c4 because of the a8 rook being a little bit under attack. And this is the move which is very sneaky. Bishop b4 check. Now, if bishop d2, then the bishop is not fianchettoed, and that makes white's setup a little bit suspect. If knight bd2, which is quite common, then black can gain an initiative with knight to e4, attacking the knight and possibly threatening knight to c3. Also, the knight on b1 usually wants to go to c3, so we've prevented that idea. If bishop d2, though, then black doesn't need to exchange. He can retreat the bishop, which does look like black has lost a tempo in development, but again it stops white's dark squared bishop from going where it wants to go. b2 is the square it's best positioned on, and this bishop's probably going to have to move to a more useful square anyway, which will also lose time. So if knight c3, that's possible, And if the bishop moves to c3, which would put it on a long diagonal, then white's knight wouldn't be able to go to c3. So knight c3 usually is played anyway. Black can castle. Again, taking on c4 is just a little bit risky. So knight e5. Now black can strike in the centre because his pieces are quite well developed, and white hasn't castled, so opening up the centre might be a little bit dangerous. And now again, my point earlier, the black bishop hasn't lost time by moving twice because its counterpart has to move twice. Now black can take on d4, so often seen is black playing c5 and capturing the white centre pawn, which will give black slightly more influence in the centre with two central pawns as opposed to white's one central pawn. Queen takes, and here this is a very pleasant position for black. In fact, I would probably play the move h6 just to kick the bishop, then trade, and that would allow me to develop with a gain of time. And if white wants, he can swap off, and black's development, I think, actually, at the very least equalises, if not creates a position where black is slightly better. That bishop on a6 is still very, very useful in attacking c4, and also if the pawns were to capture each other on d5, then the bishop is also attacking e2. It's a very useful diagonal, that a6 to f1 diagonal, and this is quite a popular line these days. It's been gaining in popularity for at least 20 years now. So if we go back, that's sort of the end of the opening and the sort of... Actually, we should kind of breezed past the middle game there because the queens came off so quickly. So that's a potential plan that black has if white does g3. White doesn't need to do this. Instead, knight c3 can be played, and if you wish, you could transpose into the Nimzo Indian, which is an opening I will do another video on, which leads to very tactical, dynamic, complicated positions with black playing bishop to b4, pinning the knight and trading on c3, giving white double pawns, but surrendering your dark squared bishop. Instead, if you want to keep things in the Queen's Indian, then bishop b7 is the move. It's very natural. And bishop g5 is played. Just on a side note, the reason bishop a6 is not so good here is white could play e4. And as white has not played g3, the bishop is fine on the f1 to a6 diagonal. White could play bishop to e2, and black's bishop on a6 would look rather silly. So bishop b7 is better here. And bishop g5 is very popular. And if you wish, you could then now transpose it to a Nimzo Indian, which you could do at any point, really. Bishop e7 is the more quiet variation, leading to similar ideas of playing c5, castling, and then maybe knight c6 after you take on d4. So just as a brief intersection, the next couple of moves might be e3, c5. So again, same sort of idea as in the Queen's Indian. a3 takes, and then black will control dark squares, and the bishop on b7 is very happy to be controlling the long diagonal. Then both sides develop, and we reach an interesting middle game where this is more, actually, this is probably closer to the Nimzo Indian lines than the Queen's Indian, because there is quite a lot of transposing and mishmashing of ideas. So we'll leave it here. The centre is still pretty good for black. It's still got two centre pawns. Better pawn structure because of white's doubled pawns, and there's a lot of dynamism on in the centre because of the pawns able to take each other. So a lot of central tension. And even though white has a slight space advantage and the bishop pair, I think it's about even for both sides, as it could be a very closed position. Black's extra knight might be useful in a closed position. So that's a kind of Nimzo-Indian transposition there. But of course you didn't need to play that. Bishop e7 is perfectly fine, and then c5. So after b6, there's also bishop f4, which does target the c7 square potentially, and gets the bishop outside of the pawn chain. So a move like e3 is not to be feared because of the c1 bishop being trapped. Bishop b7, e3 now, and here we go into the more quiet lines where bishop b4 is not played. So bishop e7, and white could now play knight c3 because bishop b4 would now definitely lose a bit of time because of moving the bishop twice. White would have got in the move e3 for nothing. So instead, c5, bishop d3, castles, castles, and here black can again capture in the center. So you could play this, e takes, you could play this a lot like hedgehog, where black puts a lot of pawns on the third rank, or the sixth rank, from judging based on your perspective, and judging by the nature of this position, I think black should have a fairly good game if he chooses to do a hedgehog, and then attempt to break with d5 or b5 at the right moment. However, that isn't to my taste, and not really to the taste of a lot of players who do the Queen's Indian, because I think the most popular move here is d5. And you may wonder why play d5 and block in your diagonal? Well, it doesn't really, because that pawn on d5 is not going to stay there. Black does want to increase the power of the b7 bishop. That is the key minor piece to make useful. And the two moves are either c takes d5, and now do not take with the pawn, because then the bishop would be blocked in. Instead, white has given us a very pleasant position with putting a knight on knight takes d5. Black now has a knight blockading an isolated queen's pawn. So black's pawn structure is definitely better, and while white has got better development, I feel that that is only a temporary measure and is not something that white can really take advantage of. So here, this is pretty even. Again, white could try trading things, but I still feel that black is doing very well here. So, for example, we could reach an endgame type position here, where black is probably a little bit better because of the b pawn is more of a liability than an asset, as it can be targeted by all of black's pieces. So, in a lot of these lines, white can trade down to an endgame, which is quite. Some people find it quite boring, but I think it's very good for you to be equal as black this early in the game. The other move, which is a more interesting line and more popular, is for white not to take on c5 and instead to develop with the rook. So here, at some point, black will play d takes. I don't see why you can't play it immediately. Bishop takes, and here we've already sort of gone into a queen's gambit declined, where black's bishop is actually useful. So the b7 bishop is a bit. This is an improvement over the queen's gambit declined lines, and all black would now be planning to do is move the knight on b8 to d5. So knight c6. If white pushes, then black gets a very nice position with knight a5, That's something to keep in mind. And I think white's losing a pawn here because of there being so many attackers on the d5 pawn as well as the black knight attacking the bishop. So more commonly, white will develop the rook. So again, white is ahead in development, but black has better piece play at the moment. The pieces are on better squares than white's pieces. And as long as black catches up in development over the next few moves and white can't create any tactics that are annoying, then I feel that this is very comfortable for black. I would say here that black is actually better because I'm not so sure white really has anything for the active pieces. And black can activate his pieces quite easily with moves like bishop d6, queen e7, rook f d8, for example. So that is the Queen's Indian defense. Just to go over the first few moves, d4 is most common, knight f6, c4, e6 first, just to keep options open, so d5, c5, bishop e7, bishop b4, and r move b6 are playable. If white plays knight c3, you can go into the Nimzo with bishop b4, or you could also play b6. So knight f3, b6, and then the idea is to move the bishop onto either a6 or b7 based on what white does, then play c5 and capture on d4, and then sometimes to even play d5 and capture on c4, just so that you open up the diagonal and therefore increase the influence of the bishop on b7. So I hope you got something out of this video. Try it. Try the Queen's Indian in your games, and hopefully you'll get good results. All right, comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.